My mother didn't even look at me when I walked into the restaurant. She smiled past me, right at my cousin Melissa. "Oh my God, there she is!" Mom stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly across the marble floor. The star of the family finally arrived. People turned. Waiters paused. Every eye moved toward Melissa, glowing, laughing, wrapped in a white engagement party dress, while I stood 3 feet away holding the gift I'd bought for my parents' anniversary dinner. No one acknowledged me, not my dad, not my brother, not even my aunt who had hugged me every Christmas since I was 6. I stayed standing. The host awkwardly shifted beside me. "Ma'am, are you with this party?" I almost laughed. Am I with this party? My own family table. My husband Daniel squeezed my hand gently. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded automatically, but my chest felt strangely hollow, like I'd already expected this. Mom kissed Melissa's cheeks dramatically. "We are so proud of you," she said loudly. "A doctor marrying into the family, finally some good news." Laughter, applause, someone clinked a glass. No one noticed I was still standing, still holding the gift, still waiting for anyone to say, "Hey, you came." Dad finally glanced my way, not warmly, not surprised, just briefly, like noticing a coat rack. "Oh, you made it," he said. Then he turned back to Melissa. And that was the exact moment I realized something terrifying. They weren't accidentally ignoring me. They had already decided I didn't matter. And what none of them knew was that tonight was the last time they would ever see me small. I took my seat quietly. No confrontation, no reaction. Because by that point, I had learned something important about my family. They didn't respond to emotion. They responded to status. And for months, I had been invisible. No calls, no invitations, no acknowledgement of the biggest day of my life, my wedding. They hadn't come, not one of them. Not even an excuse dramatic enough to sound real. Just polite silence, followed by photos of them attending Melissa's bridal shower the very same weekend. At the table, Mom kept talking. "And her fiancé's parents own 3 clinics," she said proudly. "Such a successful family." Daniel leaned toward me again. "You sure you want to stay?" I watched my parents laugh. Watched my brother pour wine for Melissa but skip my glass entirely. And a quiet thought crossed my mind. Would they recognize me if I walked out right now? Another question followed. Or did they already erase me? And the biggest one, what happens when people only value you after they see what you have? I folded my hands calmly. Because tonight, they were about to find out. Before I continue, I always like to pause here for a second. Please like and subscribe to my channel, it's totally free. Tell me where you're watching from. I read those comments later, and it reminds me how many of us have lived versions of the same story. Okay, let me explain how things got here, because none of this started with the dinner. It started long before my wedding. My name is Lauren. I was 31 when this happened, and for most of my life, I believed my family was normal. Not affectionate exactly, but functional. My parents valued achievement above everything else. My dad was an accountant, precise, practical, emotionally distant. My mom believed appearances were survival. "You are treated how you present yourself," she used to say. Translation, success earned love. Growing up, my younger brother Ethan naturally fit their expectations. Confident, social, athletic, he brought home trophies and attention. I brought home stability. Good grades, reliable behavior. No drama, I became the easy child, the one who didn't need praise, at least that's what I told myself. After college, I built a quiet life, marketing analyst, steady job, small apartment, predictable routines, and honestly, I liked it. Then I met Daniel. We met in line at a coffee shop during a rainstorm. He dropped his wallet. I picked it up. He said, "I feel like I owe you coffee now." I replied, "You already bought it." He laughed, genuine, warm, and asked if he could sit with me anyway. 3 hours later, we were still talking. Daniel was different from my family. He listened, really listened. He remembered small things. He asked questions nobody in my family ever asked me. "What makes you excited lately?" I remember freezing. No one had ever asked that before. Our relationship grew quietly. No dramatic passion, just safety, consistency, partnership. When he proposed, it happened in our kitchen while we were cooking pasta. No audience, no performance, just him saying, "I want every ordinary day with you." I said yes immediately. I called my parents that night. Mom's first response wasn't congratulations. It was, "What does he do?" "He's an engineer," I said. Pause. "What kind of salary range are we talking about?" I laughed awkwardly, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Dad got on the phone. "Well, stability matters." That was their version of approval. Still, I assumed they'd come around. Families always do for weddings. Right? The first strange moment happened during dress shopping. I invited my mom, Melissa, and my aunt. Mom almost canceled. "I'm busy helping Melissa look at venues," she said. I blinked. "But my appointment's been booked for 2 months." Long pause. "Well, I'll try to stop by." She arrived late, 40 minutes late. Melissa arrived with her. They walked in laughing about centerpiece designs for Melissa's future engagement that hadn't even happened yet. The consultant smiled warmly at me. "Are we ready to try the bride's dresses?" Mom corrected her immediately. "Oh no, Melissa's just helping today." Just helping. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, something quieter. Like realizing I'd misunderstood my place. I stepped out wearing the first dress. Simple, elegant. Daniel would have loved it. I looked at my mom. She barely glanced up from her phone. Melissa tilted her head. "It's nice," she said. "But maybe something more memorable." Mom nodded. "Yes, Lauren's always been understated." Understated. I stood there under bright boutique lights, feeling oddly invisible inside a wedding dress. The consultant whispered gently, "How do you feel in it?" I swallowed. "I love it." That was the first time I chose something without waiting for my mother's approval, and I noticed her smile fade slightly. A week later, Mom called. "You may want to reconsider your venue size." "Why?" "Well, we can't promise many relatives will travel." I frowned. "It's 2 hours away." "Yes, but Melissa might have engagement events around then." I thought I misheard. "My wedding date was set first." Silence. Then softly, "Lauren, you know Melissa brings people together. Her events will be larger." I sat on my couch staring at the wall. Larger. Daniel watched my face carefully. "What happened?" I repeated the conversation. He shook his head slowly. "That's not normal." I defended them automatically. "They're just busy." But a new thought crept in. Why does my happiness feel like an inconvenience to them? Seen. The RSVP silence invitations went out. Weeks passed. Friends responded quickly. Coworkers sent excited messages, but family replies stayed blank. I called my brother. "Hey, did you get the invite?" "Yeah," Ethan said casually. "So, are you coming?" Pause. "I'll see, work's crazy." "You knew the date for months." "Lauren, don't make it a thing." I hung up feeling embarrassed for asking. That night I scrolled social media. Melissa posted photos from a family brunch. Everyone smiling, everyone together. Caption, "Family time," read no mention of me. No tag. I realized something uncomfortable. They weren't forgetting. They were gathering without me. I finally asked my mom directly. "Are you coming to my wedding?" She sighed like I'd asked something unreasonable. "We'll try." Try, not yes, not no, just try. "Mom," I said quietly, "this is important to me." Another sigh. "You've always been independent, Lauren. You don't need all that attention." The words landed harder than shouting ever could. "You don't need us." I hung up shaking. Daniel wrapped his arms around me. "They're wrong," he said. But I wasn't angry yet. I was confused, because part of me still believed love would show up at the last minute. The weeks before the wedding felt surreal. I stopped updating my family, stopped sharing plans, stopped hoping for excitement. Something inside me adjusted quietly. Lower expectations, lower emotional investment. I told myself, maybe this is just who they are. Maybe I'm overreacting. But another voice whispered, or maybe you're finally seeing clearly. The morning of the wedding, I checked my phone. No messages from my parents. No good luck. No, we love you. Nothing. Guests arrived. Music started. Friends hugged me. Daniel's parents cried happy tears. Every time the door opened, my heart lifted, then dropped. An hour before the ceremony, I accepted it. They weren't coming. I walked down the aisle anyway. And here's the strange part. I wasn't devastated. I felt calm, like a chapter quietly closing. During vows, Daniel squeezed my hands. "You're not alone," he whispered. For the first time that day, I believed it. We got married surrounded by people who chose us. And afterward, I made a decision without announcing it. I stopped chasing my family. No dramatic cutoff. No confrontation. I just stepped back. 3 weeks after the wedding, something unexpected happened. Daniel received a promotion offer in another city. Better position. Major salary increase. Relocation package. I remember sitting at the kitchen table reading the email together. He looked nervous. "It's a big move." I smiled. "Maybe that's exactly what we need." We moved quietly. No announcement to my family, no farewell dinner, no explanation. And for months, they didn't notice. Not one call asking where we were, not one question about married life. It hurt at first, then it stopped hurting, because distance clarified something powerful. I wasn't missing them. I was missing the idea of them. Our new city changed everything. Daniel thrived at work. I transitioned into consulting. Unexpectedly, one of my projects exploded into success. Long hours turned into major contracts. Major contracts turned into financial freedom faster than I ever imagined. One evening, Daniel tossed me a set of keys. I laughed. "What's this?" "Come outside." Parked under streetlights sat a dark silver Porsche, not flashy, elegant, powerful. I stared at it, stunned. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "You built this life too." I ran my hand over the hood. Cool metal, reflected city lights, and I felt something unfamiliar. Not pride exactly, ownership, independence. No approval required. I didn't buy it for status. I bought it because I could. And strangely, that was the moment everything with my family began to change. 3 days later, my phone rang. "Mom." I almost didn't answer. I hadn't heard her voice in months. I picked up. "Hi, Mom." Her tone sounded unusually warm. "Lauren, we've been meaning to reach you. Oh, yes," she continued quickly. "We heard you've been doing very well lately." I frowned. "How did you hear that?" Pause. Then she said the sentence that made my stomach drop. "Well, your cousin saw you getting into a Porsche." Silence filled the line. For the first time since my wedding, my family sounded interested in me, and I suddenly understood. They hadn't remembered their daughter. They had noticed an upgrade. Mom's voice softened. "We're having a family dinner this weekend. You and Daniel should come. Everyone misses you." I looked at Daniel across the room. He already knew. I covered the phone and whispered, "They want to see us now." He raised one eyebrow. "What are you going to do?" I returned to the call calmly. "We'll be there." Because at that moment, I realized something. They thought they were inviting the same quiet daughter they ignored. They had no idea I was arriving with something else entirely. Not revenge, not anger, a surprise. And this time, I wasn't coming to be accepted. I was coming to let them reveal who they really were. The moment we pulled into the restaurant parking lot, I knew nothing had changed. My parents had chosen the most expensive place in town, not because they liked food, because they liked being seen. Valet lights glowed against polished glass windows. People dressed in soft luxury stepped inside laughing, holding wine glasses, performing wealth the way my mother always admired. Daniel turned off the Porsche. The engine settled into silence. For a second, neither of us moved. "You ready?" he asked gently. I watched my reflection in the windshield, calm face, steady breathing. "Yes," I said, "I think I finally am." But as we stepped out, I noticed something strange. 2 of my cousins were already outside, waiting, not for dinner, for the car. Melissa's fiancé, Andrew, circled it slowly. "Is this yours?" he asked immediately. Not hello, not how are you, just that. Daniel smiled politely. "Yeah," Andrew whistled low. "Wow, didn't know you guys were doing like that." Melissa crossed her arms, studying me in a way she never had before, not dismissive, evaluating. "Oh my God," she said. "You never told anyone you upgraded your life." Upgraded, like I'd changed social rank. I felt Daniel's hand rest lightly at my back, and for the first time since arriving, embarrassment wasn't what I felt. It was clarity. They weren't welcoming me, they were inspecting me. Inside the restaurant, everything moved fast. Too fast. My mother stood the moment she saw us, the same woman who barely looked at me weeks earlier. Her smile stretched wide. "Lauren," She rushed forward and hugged me tightly. Too tightly. Perfumed arms wrapped around me like a performance. "We've missed you so much." I froze for half a second, because my body remembered the silence after my wedding. Dad shook Daniel's hand enthusiastically. "Good to see you, son." Son. He had never called him that before. Ethan appeared beside them holding 2 wine glasses. "One for you," he said, handing Daniel a drink first. Then he looked at me. "And Lauren, wow, you look different." I smiled politely. "Married life, I guess." But internally, a quiet observation formed. They're recalibrating. Mom guided us to the center seats at the table. Center. The position usually reserved for Melissa. Melissa noticed, too. Her smile tightened for just a second. Tiny, but real. And suddenly I understood tonight wasn't just about welcoming me back. It was about rearranging hierarchy. Dinner began with compliments disguised as questions. Mom leaned forward. "So, how did you afford something like that?" she asked casually, sipping wine. The table went quiet, everyone listening. I answered simply. "Work's been going well," Dad chuckled. "Well, good investments matter. Sometimes people just get lucky." Lucky, I nodded slowly. Daniel spoke calmly. "Lauren actually led a major client acquisition this year." Mom blinked. "Oh, you're still doing marketing, still, as if nothing I did could evolve." "Yes," I said. "Consulting now." Melissa tilted her head. "Freelance?" The word carried subtle judgment. "No," I replied evenly. "Contract strategy work." Andrew leaned in. "So like temporary jobs?" The table laughed lightly. My cheeks warmed not from shame but recognition. This was familiar territory. Minimize, reduce. Reframe success into coincidence. I took a sip of water. Stay calm, because humiliation only works when you react. As conversation moved around me, I noticed patterns I had never seen clearly before. When Melissa spoke, everyone leaned in. When I spoke, they redirected. When Daniel talked about work, Dad interrupted with stories about Andrew's medical investments. Every interaction subtly placed me back where I used to be. The background daughter, I watched silently, and something strange happened. I stopped wanting their approval. Instead, I became curious. How far will they go to keep me small? Halfway through appetizers, my aunt spoke up. "We were so sad to miss your wedding." I turned toward her. This was new. "You were?" I asked gently. Mom answered before she could. "Oh, it was just terrible timing." Melissa added quickly, "You know how chaotic things were with my engagement starting." My fork paused midair. Engagement starting. Her engagement happened after my wedding. I felt Daniel glance at me. He noticed too. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, small weddings are trendy now anyway." Small, like it had been a design choice, not abandonment. I spoke softly. "We invited 60 people." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Yes, but intimate, very modern." The table nodded, reality rewriting itself in real time. I realized they weren't ignoring what happened. They were editing it. And suddenly I saw the deeper humiliation. They needed my wedding to seem unimportant, because admitting they skipped it would expose something uncomfortable about themselves. "Mom, you always preferred simple things, Lauren." Me, I preferred people showing up. Silence. Glasses paused midair. Dad chuckled awkwardly. "No need to dwell on the past." Me, I'm not dwelling, just remembering. Melissa smiled sweetly. "You know Mom gets overwhelmed with events." Me, "She attended 3 of yours that month." Andrew laughed nervously. Okay, family audit tonight." "Daniel, we're just talking." Mom's smile hardened slightly. "Well, everyone makes choices." There it was, not apology, justification. I nodded slowly. "Yes, they do." Inside, something settled. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was observing. After main courses arrived, conversation shifted completely. Toward money, toward assets, toward lifestyle. Dad asked Daniel detailed questions about investments he had never asked before. Mom asked about neighborhoods, school districts, property values. Melissa leaned closer. "So, are you guys thinking about upgrading houses too?" I smiled faintly. "We like where we live," she frowned. "But with your car, people will assume you're moving into something bigger." Assume. Everything with them was about perception. Ethan suddenly asked, "What's the monthly payment on that thing?" The table laughed again. Daniel answered calmly, "There isn't one." Silence. Mom blinked. You mean lease? No, Daniel said, paid outright. Forks stopped moving. I watched realization spread across their faces like slow sunrise. Not admiration, calculation. The energy changed instantly. Mom's posture straightened. Dad's tone softened. Melissa stopped interrupting me. For the first time in my life, my family listened when I spoke. And oddly, that felt worse than being ignored. Because now I knew exactly what activated their attention. Not love. Value. I felt a strange emotional split inside myself. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to leave. Instead, I stayed calm, because I hadn't come to confront them. I had come to understand something, and the night was just beginning. Dessert menus arrived. Mom suddenly said loudly, You know, Melissa and Andrew are planning a very elegant wedding. Ballroom, live orchestra, the works. Everyone nodded approvingly. Then she added casually, Very different scale from Lauren's ceremony. The comparison hung in the air. Melissa pretended embarrassment. Oh, stop, Aunt Karen. But she smiled. I looked at my mother carefully. She was reasserting hierarchy, even now, even after noticing our success. She needed Melissa to remain the achievement daughter. I placed my napkin down neatly. I hope it's beautiful, I said sincerely. Mom looked relieved. Conflict avoided. But internally, another realization clicked into place. They didn't actually want me back. They wanted access to whatever they believed I represented now. And suddenly I remembered the call. We've been meaning to reach you. No, they had been waiting for confirmation of status. Then my brother said something that changed everything. Casually. Without thinking. So Mom was worried you were struggling after moving. I frowned. Why would she think that? He shrugged. Well, you disappeared. No big wedding photos, no updates. We figured things didn't work out. The table grew quiet again. I turned slowly toward my mother. She avoided eye contact. And suddenly it hit me. They hadn't just ignored me. They had assumed failure. They believed I married poorly, moved away quietly, faded into an unimpressive life. And they were comfortable with that narrative until the Porsche disrupted it. A deep calm spread through me, not anger, understanding. The humiliation wasn't accidental, it was maintenance. They kept me small because it protected their image of themselves. Me, you thought I failed, Mom laughed lightly. Oh, don't be dramatic. Me, you never called. Dad, we didn't want to intrude. Me, you never asked if I was happy. Melissa jumped in. We assumed you'd reach out if something was wrong. Daniel spoke quietly. Why assume something was wrong? No answer, just shifting eyes, wine glasses lifting, avoidance. And in that silence, I saw my entire childhood clearly for the first time. I was loved conditionally, celebrated selectively, remembered strategically. I didn't confront them further. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I leaned back and smiled. And that confused them more than anger would have, because they expected emotional reaction, defense, explanation. Instead, I became calm, observant, almost detached. I started asking questions instead, gentle ones. How's everyone been? What projects are you excited about? I watched how quickly they competed for attention, how conversations revolved around prestige, how my presence suddenly mattered when tied to perceived success. I realized something powerful. They had revealed themselves without realizing it, and I hadn't even shown them the surprise yet. Dinner ended with exaggerated warmth. Mom hugged me again, longer this time. We should do this more often, Dad added. Family needs to stay close. Melissa smiled tightly. Yes, especially now. We walked toward the valet stand together. Everyone followed, waiting, watching. The attendant pulled the Porsche forward. Headlights glowing, doors opening smoothly. My family stood silently as if witnessing proof. Mom touched the hood lightly. It's beautiful, she whispered. Then she said the sentence that confirmed everything. We always knew you'd do well eventually. Eventually. Like success had arrived late, like my worth had finally matured enough to notice. I smiled gently, because they still didn't understand. The car wasn't the surprise. It was only the setup. I opened the passenger door for Daniel, then turned back toward my parents. There's actually something I wanted to tell you tonight. They leaned in instantly, curious, expectant, hungry for information. And for the first time since childhood, I held the power of the conversation completely. I took a breath, because what I was about to reveal would change how every single person at that table saw the past. The valet handed Daniel the keys. My parents didn't move. None of them walked toward their own cars. They stayed gathered around ours, watching, waiting, like the evening hadn't really ended yet. Streetlights reflected across the Porsche's hood, turning the scene strangely theatrical, except no one realized the performance wasn't mine. It was theirs. Mom crossed her arms gently, smiling in that careful way she used when she expected impressive news. "So," she said, voice warm and curious, "what did you want to tell us?" I noticed how everyone leaned closer. Melissa subtly adjusted her posture. Andrew slipped his hands into his pockets but stayed near. Even Ethan stopped scrolling his phone. For the first time in years, my family was fully focused on me, and oddly my heartbeat stayed calm, because this wasn't confrontation. It was confirmation. I glanced at Daniel. He gave the smallest nod. We had already talked about this moment on the drive over, not as revenge, not as punishment, just truth. "I actually didn't come tonight just to catch up," I said quietly. Mom laughed lightly. "Well, you certainly got our attention." Yes, that was exactly the point. Dad frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" I rested my hand against the car door. Cool metal under my palm grounded me. "I realized something after the wedding," I said. "There were conversations we never had." Mom's smile flickered. "Oh, honey, we already explained the scheduling issue." I shook my head gently. "I'm not upset about the wedding anymore." That confused them. They expected lingering hurt. Instead, I sounded peaceful, and peace makes people nervous when they know they owe you something. Melissa tilted her head. "Then what is this about?" I looked at each of them carefully, one by one, letting silence stretch just long enough, because silence makes people reveal themselves. "It's about understanding why things happened the way they did." Andrew chuckled awkwardly. "Sounds serious for a parking lot conversation." Daniel answered calmly. "It probably should have happened a long time ago." Mom's expression tightened slightly, and I saw it, the first flicker of discomfort. Mom switched tone instantly. Warm right arrow managerial. "Well, if this is about feelings, maybe we should talk privately another time." Translation, not in front of witnesses, I smiled. "No, this is actually the perfect time." Dad shifted his weight. "Lauren, we just had a lovely dinner. No need to dig up old misunderstandings." Old misunderstandings. That phrase hit differently now, because it implied shared fault. I kept my voice calm. "I'm not digging anything up. I just want clarity." Ethan sighed loudly. "Are we seriously doing this?" I looked at him gently. "You didn't come to my wedding either." His mouth opened, then closed. First crack. Melissa quickly jumped in. "Okay, this feels unfair. Everyone had commitments." I nodded. "You're right, everyone made choices." Same words my mother used earlier. Mom noticed immediately. Her lips pressed together. She recognized her own language being handed back to her. And that embarrassed her more than anger would have. "Mom, Lauren, you know we love you." Me, "I never said you didn't." Dad, "Then what exactly are you trying to prove?" Me, "Nothing, I'm trying to understand." Melissa, "Understand what?" Me, "Why I only became interesting again after someone saw the car." Silence. Real silence this time. No laughter, no redirecting, just exposed truth hanging in cool night air. Andrew looked down. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Mom forced a small laugh. "That's ridiculous." I waited, because denial always comes first. "I moved cities," I continued gently. "No one asked where." Mom crossed her arms tighter. "We assumed you were busy." "I got married," I said. "No one called afterward." Dad frowned. "We didn't want to interfere with newlyweds." I nodded slowly. "And yet, the moment someone saw us getting into a Porsche, I got invited to dinner." No raised voice. No accusation, just sequence. Fact after fact. That's when their expressions changed, because facts don't give people emotional escape routes. Melissa spoke first. "You're making this sound transactional." I met her eyes calmly. "I didn't make it transactional." Another silence. I watched realization move across their faces, not guilt yet, but awareness. They understood how it looked, and public awareness is its own form of humiliation. Mom's voice softened defensively. "We were proud of you, we just didn't know how well you were doing." There it was, the confession hidden inside justification. I smiled slightly. "That's exactly it." I reached into my purse, pulled out a small envelope. Dad looked confused. "What's that?" "Something I planned to give you at my wedding." Mom blinked. "You brought gifts for us?" "Yes." I handed it to her. Her hands hesitated before opening it. Inside were two things, a printed photograph and a folded document. She looked at the photo first, her face drained of color. It was a candid picture from my wedding ceremony. Daniel and I standing at the altar. Behind us, rows of smiling guests, but one entire section of chairs sat empty, reserved signs still visible. Family section, empty. Mom inhaled sharply. "I didn't know it looked like that," I said quietly. "I saved those seats anyway." No accusation, just truth. And suddenly the humiliation shifted direction, not toward me, toward them. Dialogue sequence, emotional collapse starting. Mom. "Lauren, Dad. We didn't realize me. That's the point. You didn't realize." Melissa. "Okay, but showing this now feels dramatic." I looked at her calmly. It felt dramatic standing at the altar wondering if my parents got lost. Andrew looked away. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. No one defended the absence this time, because the image removed excuses. It showed consequence. Publicly, visually, undeniably. The second layer of the surprise. Mom slowly unfolded the document. Her eyebrows knit together. "What is this?" "It's a partnership agreement," I said. Dad leaned closer immediately. "A business contract?" "Yes," Daniel spoke for the first time. "Lauren started a consulting firm 6 months ago." Mom's eyes widened. "You own a company?" I nodded. "We've expanded faster than expected." Dad straightened instantly, interest replacing discomfort. "Well, that's excellent news." But I wasn't finished. "We're opening a second office here," I added calmly. Everyone froze. Here, near them, Melissa blinked. "You're moving back." "No," I said gently, "but I'll be visiting often." Mom smiled with relief. "Oh, that's wonderful. Family will finally see you more." I held her gaze. "Yes, that's why I wanted clarity tonight. Because proximity changes dynamics. And I wasn't returning as the ignored daughter. I was returning with independence. Something subtle happened then. My parents began speaking differently, carefully, respectfully. They asked about my work, my plans, my decisions. The same people who minimized my wedding now waited for my opinions. And the realization hit me fully. Their behavior hadn't changed because they understood me. It changed because my perceived value changed. That understanding didn't hurt anymore. It freed me. I wasn't chasing approval. I was observing conditional affection in real time. Mom suddenly spoke softly. "I wish we had been more involved." It sounded almost sincere. But sincerity arrived late. I nodded kindly. "I used to wish that too." She looked at me hopefully. "Maybe we can make up for lost time." I paused. "Not for drama, for honesty." "You can be part of my life now," I said calmly. "But it won't look like before." Dad frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means I stopped waiting to be chosen." No anger, no bitterness, just boundary. And that sentence landed heavier than accusation ever could. Because everyone standing there understood. They had lost influence they once assumed permanent. Melissa spoke quietly. "You think we only care because you're successful." I met her eyes gently. "I think success made you notice me." No raised voice, no sarcasm, just clarity. And in that moment, the social hierarchy flipped completely. Not through dominance, through emotional independence. They weren't rejecting me anymore. They were trying not to be rejected. Mom's eyes softened with something close to regret. "We didn't mean to make you feel invisible." I smiled faintly. "You didn't mean to, but you did." And no one argued, because truth delivered calmly leaves no space for defense. The night ended awkwardly, not explosively, just quieter. Hugs lingered longer, voices softened. People spoke carefully around me. Daniel opened the car door. As we drove away, I watched my family growing smaller in the rearview mirror. Not enemies, not villains, just people finally seeing consequences. Daniel glanced at me. "You okay?" I exhaled slowly. "I think I stopped needing them to understand." He smiled. That's when things change. And he was right, because peace arrived the moment I stopped negotiating my worth. Work expanded quickly. The new office opened successfully. I visited my hometown regularly, professionally, not emotionally dependent. My parents called more often, not perfectly, but differently. Conversations felt cautious, respectful, less dismissive. Melissa's wedding came and went. I attended as a guest. No competition, no comparison, just distance and calm observation. The dynamic had permanently shifted. They treated me like an adult they could lose. And strangely, that created more kindness than lifelong compliance ever had. I used to believe family love was automatic. Now I understand something quieter. Some relationships don't change because you argue harder. They change when you stop shrinking to fit them. I didn't win anything that night. I didn't defeat anyone. I simply stopped asking people to recognize my value. And once I stopped asking, they finally started seeing it. Not because I forced them, but because I no longer needed them to. Peace didn't come from revenge. It came from independence. I'm curious what you think. Were my parents truly wrong, or were they just reacting the way many families do when success changes perception? If you were in my place, would you forgive them completely, keep emotional distance, or walk away for good? Tell me honestly. I read every comment, and stories like this always bring out powerful perspectives. Thanks for watching.